Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thank you for hopping on. We'll give it a sec here, but thrilled to welcome you to another brand boot camp. Today, I'm going to chat a little bit of video podcasting with a wonderful individual. I'm super excited for today. So before we jump into things, I'll give a quick little introduction and hello here, and then we get to talk about video podcasting and hopefully answer some questions along the way. So my name is Dania Wood. I am a producer here at Quill. Quill is a branded podcasting agency, so we help brands create cool, awesome shows and fun content that resonates with all sorts of audiences. I also represent Co-Host, which is our analytics and hosting platform. So if you want to know a little bit more about your audience, what they're doing, feeling, thinking, that's where Co-Host gets involved. Today, I'm very lucky to be joined by Stephen Robles, who I'll pass over, who's our rep from Riverside.
Thank you so much. And I'm a video and podcast producer. I've been podcasting for 15 years, been with Riverside for over 3, and make videos both for YouTube and doing webinars like this. And video podcasting, I do it personally, and it's a topic I'm pretty passionate about. I'm actually going to be speaking at Podcast Movement next week about it as well. So excited to be here.
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, Podcast Movement is going to be a good one. I know we have some of our team heading down there too. So we are excited about it and thrilled to have you here to talk about video because I think we kind of got one of the hottest topics right now. So I'm excited that that fell into our domain today. So over the next 30 minutes, we're going to kind of chat through the rise of video podcasting, what it could mean for your brand, some promotion strategies for video, and kind of how to integrate video into your existing podcast. So if you're podcasting, maybe where video can start to step in, that's not so much of a lift. I know sometimes it can feel a little daunting to start talking video, but I think you kind of can't chat podcasting now without. So I think that kind of brings us into kicking it off, which is why video, why now? I mean, obviously the consumer or the consumption of podcasts has changed a lot. So Stephen, I guess to start us off, what kind of changes have you seen in audience behavior in the past year? Where are people skewing when it comes to video?
Yeah, the bottom line is more people are preferring video more often. And even for myself, again, I've been podcasting a long time. I did audio only for many years. And even now with my current podcast, I've had people who followed me from audio only to video, and they just say, I prefer watching you guys, or I prefer seeing that, even if it's something that's in the background, playing on their computer, but then we show something on screen so they can tune into that. And the stats match this. Cumulus Media had some metrics recently where people of all ages and platforms, YouTube takes 34% of podcast consumerism. So 34% are on YouTube watching podcasts, Spotify at 17%, which is also video, and then Apple Podcast, which used to be the leader, now taking 11% of those podcast views. And so video is obviously huge, not only for the audience, but for these platforms. And YouTube is actually going after TV. You'll actually see the stats where viewers watching YouTube on a TV has been increasing, especially in the last year or two. And YouTube has even outwardly stated, we're not just going after internet video, we're going to be a source of entertainment that you watch on the big screen of your home, which is another huge opportunity for video podcasts.
Yeah, no, I agree. YouTube is becoming quite the podcast, I guess, engine. And I know we have this conversation a lot, but as far as discoverability goes, a lot of people are finding new podcasts and new shows through YouTube. It's becoming quite the engine for that. So I guess kind of on that, I mean, YouTube is coming for the crown. They're coming for traditional media on a couple of those things. Is there a reason that you think now they're so motivated to push it? And I mean, Spotify too. I think it's something like now, like a good chunk on Spotify, maybe around, I think the recent research saying around half are like now integrating video or incorporating video podcasts. What are your thoughts there?
What does every platform want? Like YouTube and Spotify, they want audience and viewers staying on their platform for a longer amount of time because that's more ads they can show. It's more time that, they have their people are on their platform. And so podcast inherently being long form, you're talking 1, 2, some shows are even 3 hours or more. And that means if people are watching podcasts on YouTube and Spotify, they're spending hours on that platform. And that's why platforms want it. But it's also great for podcast creators and brands because that discoverability has not existed for podcasts for a long time. Apple Podcasts and iTunes was the only place to find podcasts for a long time. You can listen in other players, but there was no discoverability engine. And there's been a huge change in the last year where Spotify, you can literally scroll the browse tab in the Spotify app and you'll see clips of podcasts just right there. And that's
Yeah.
something where a new audience can find you just out of the blue, whereas previously that was much more difficult. And so you see Spotify and YouTube building tools for brands and for podcast creators for that discoverability and just to get in front of more people.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It feels like the barrier to entry to kind of new content is lower, right? Like if I'm talking to you about, hey, I want you to listen to this new podcast and I send you a 40-minute episode, that's a time commitment. But I'm like, hey, here's this clip or this content that I found on YouTube. If you like it, then kind of check out the full episode. I feel like it's much more compelling when it comes to shareability and stuff like that.
Shareability is a huge deal. YouTube makes it easy to not only share a video, but also a timestamp in the video. So if there's a clip, you want to do that. And we'll talk maybe about short form later. But when you have that viral moment in your episode, you can now have that posted in the same place as your full podcast. So you can post that as a YouTube short, and YouTube has a mechanism for linking from a short to a long form video. And now you have a one-step path from someone swiping, seeing that viral moment on YouTube Shorts, and now listening to your full episode. And that's just not something that podcasts have had until now.
Yeah, no. Whenever you can kind of create that link, and we've seen some great success on our side with doing stuff like that, where we go, hey, here's the short, and if you like this, guess what you're gonna like the rest of the episode, and you can kind of create that cool connection. So we're definitely seeing it, and it feels like now, when you're kind of making those connections across platforms to players and all that stuff, you're seeing a lot of benefit. And I think when it also comes to talking about why video, why now, I think I also want to talk to you a little bit about who, because when we look at, who's consuming the video content, it does seem to be that there's an uptick specifically for, your Gen Z. They think they have right here with like 84% of monthly Gen Z podcast consumers are consuming some portion of video. What are your thoughts as far as the who when it comes to video podcasting?
Yeah, absolutely. All the stats show that younger generations, this is just how they consume podcasts. It's just a video medium for them. And so if you're wanting to reach that up and coming generation, then yeah, video is key. And not only the long form on YouTube and Spotify, but obviously TikTok, Instagram, Reels, and those platforms. And that's one of the benefits, which we might talk about later, about doing video, is you can really repurpose to all those platforms with a single piece of recorded content, which allows you to reach those younger generations, plus anyone who might be on LinkedIn. You see podcast clips on there, which is a different demographic, plus threads and even the text-based social media. So yeah, highly recommend.
No, I agree. And I guess within that, right? I mean, you mentioned this too. You find that even for those who, have been consuming your content or loving to kind of get this other side of you. So what are you finding, I guess, video maybe unlocks kind of right now that maybe wasn't so accessible before, that maybe audio alone doesn't?
I've loved the podcast medium for years, and I think it was unique because listeners can almost develop this parasocial relationship or connection with a podcast host. And video does that to an even greater extent, because not only are they hearing your voice for hours on end every week, but now they can see you too. And so I think it builds a greater connection with the audience, which is really key for brands trying to connect with someone like their audience and their potential customers and clients. And it's still the same benefit of the long form audio. People still will just flip between video and audio. They might be watching it on their phone, just put their phone screen to sleep, and they can continue listening. So you get the best of both worlds, plus that greater recognizability, greater connection. And if you have like special guests, as we're going to get into some strategies later, having a guest and someone sees that video of the guest in a short or maybe the full length video, that's immediately recognizable, even faster than maybe reading a guest name in an episode title. And so it's just a greater connection, greater exposure. And yeah, people just love it.
Oh, so many exciting things to take advantage of. And I think that kind of transitions us very well into kind of our next point that I know we wanted to dive into, which is video isn't just seen, it's felt. And I mean, you talked about it, I think, in a really great way, right? Like it's one thing to hear, a host and chat, but it's another thing to actually see and build a connection. And especially when you're spending 40 minutes with someone, if you think about a 40-minute phone call with your friend or a 40-minute FaceTime, you probably feel a little bit more connected, when you can actually see them and have that back and forth. So I guess when it comes to that, when you think about body language and tone, how are you finding that we're seeing these messages shift now that you're getting that full breadth, that full picture?
There's a TED talk by Rachel Botsman from like 12 years ago, and she said the currency of today's internet economy is trust. And I think even with the rise of AI generated content, that's becoming even more true. And so when someone can actually see you flesh and blood on the screen in the video podcast, there's just a different level of trust and authority built into that kind of exposure when someone's watching you in that medium. And so just seeing you on camera and you looking into the lens develops a connection that you really can't have in an audio only medium, but also body language and trust. There was a recent episode of Diary of a CEO where he talked to a body language expert, and again, talking about how it can either build trust and again, building your authority either as a brand or creator. And so having that visual medium, I think, is just brings it to a whole another level of connection as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a phenomenal point. And it's funny that you laddered back to a podcast that you had recently listened on it, because I have a similar one. I was creating a podcast and they were talking about, again, with that rise of technology, that the only like real trusted source of storytelling and communication is going to be like a verbal communication, probably, whether through an audio format or in person, because, for 40 minutes, it's a lot more difficult to fake a 40-minute conversation or clip, right? So I definitely agree with you. And I think when it comes back to building that trust and authenticity, video is it's a phenomenal catalyst for it. Even, I think of the people that I really trust. It's like, oh, well, yes, I've heard you, but I've also seen you, I've connected with you in a way that's different because you have that face-to-face. And I guess within that, do you kind of at Riverside have any examples of a brand that you saw, I guess, boost loyalty from video and kind of leveraging this trust?
Absolutely. We have so many use cases. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal to Netflix and others use Riverside. But a few specific examples. I mean, I've heard from real estate agents who will do things like a video podcast. And while they might not have a huge audience, their purpose for that podcast is leads to sell houses. And podcasting has been a great medium and lead generator for them. I think of another one, Nilay Patel, who hosts the Decoder podcast for Vox Media. He interviews CEOs of Microsoft and Google. And that's just a way of, being able to share those clips, the legitimacy of that podcast, and sharing that authority. But one very specific example, there's a brand called Automox, who started doing a video podcast, and in one fiscal quarter from using Riverside and doing video podcast, their YouTube subscriber count went from 700 to 27,000 in a fiscal quarter, 3 months. And
wow.
Yeah, and just doing video also, it humanizes a brand, can also humanize the leadership of that brand, again, building that trust between potential customer, client, and the brand. And we just see that all the time at Riverside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I also really loved your point about like legitimacy. I think, if you're having on those high profile guests, or, you have a guest on that you're really excited about, who's a bit of a big hitter, if you can incorporate that video. And I worked with a client not too long back, and they did that. They had a guest host and a really great guest. And although they were primarily audio, for that episode, they did like a special bonus video episode. And I thought that was a great idea, because it's like, okay, you have this great opportunity to chat with someone amazing, and you're going to leverage it even more. And then they had content, from this guest that they could pepper across their whole ecosystem and across their marketing channels, which I think also brings us to another great segue to kind of talk about more channels. So I want to talk about more channels and more opportunities here. And obviously, video content is phenomenal because you can repurpose it. But I also think it's important to kind of talk about how and maybe the strategy behind that content repurposing. So what are some underrated ways that you think you can promote a video podcast across your channels and really use this kind of wealth of content you're creating?
Yeah, again, the great part about having the video is if you were scrolling social media or a platform and you see an audiogram where it's like animated captions and just a static image, how much more engaging that video is when someone comes across that. And I always tell people, be everywhere. If you have a great clip from your podcast episode, whether it was a funny moment, it was an insightful moment, really share that everywhere. I think people sleep on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn as a platform is actually really pushing towards more video content, sharing short form video clips and even some longer form clips, and live streams, which you can do live streams with Riverside and LinkedIn as well. And so if that's more of your demographic and the customer base you're looking at, share on LinkedIn, but also share the same clip on Threads, Blue Sky, and all of those platforms. You can still upload video, and you can find much success even there, as well as Instagram and TikTok and all those platforms. And also Spotify, When you upload an episode of a podcast to Spotify, not only can you add the full length video, but you can actually upload a vertical clip as a promo for that episode, and Spotify will use that in their browse and discover pages. So
Yeah.
you can actually not only full length video, but also those vertical videos. And we do that for my podcast every week because you just never know. I mean, I've know shows that I saw clips from for probably a year. And
Yeah.
it took me that long to be like, you know what, I think I'm going to really like this podcast. And then finally in my podcast app, go to actually listen and watch it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something that I did want to talk about too. And I mean, we talk about this a little bit on our side in the sense where it's amazing to use these clips for promotion, but sometimes that conversion isn't always there. And I think there's some people who might think, oh, my video clips aren't working because it's not driving downloads for my podcast. And that's when I kind of want to go, just hold on a little bit, just wait and see, because content is content, right? And sometimes it might be even a little benefit is seeing those content as a little bit isolated. Eventually, right, you want it to drive downloads and want it to drive interest to the podcast. But the clips in itself, if they're doing well and are actively engaging people, that's still brand awareness. That's still thought leadership, right? Now you're just bringing it to another platform in kind of a content style that might be a little bit more snackable. Because I know we say that, sometimes your long form content people and your short form content people aren't always the same, and getting someone from short to long can be difficult. But if you can use your long form content, repurpose it to get both, and then even drive some of those short form people over to long form people, I think there's a lot of benefit there.
And I just want to interject, when you share those clips, also think about, is this clip going to be valuable if this is the only thing a person sees from my brand or from my podcast? Because a lot of times people try really hard on that conversion side. And in every clip, they make it like, go listen to the full show, go listen to the full show. And if you think about it, if someone's scrolling on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts, they're not really in the mood to break what they're doing and go listen to a full-length episode. So make sure what you share is valuable in and of itself. And if you do that over and over again and be consistent, now you're going to develop someone who has an affinity for your brand, for the content that you make, and then they'll go seek out more. And Heidi had a question in the chat talking about the Spotify vertical video algorithm. And we have videos on the Riverside YouTube channel where I talk about it, but just go to creators.spotify.com and you can do all of that on your Spotify podcast and upload vertical clips per episode.
No, that's a great call out. And I think as we kind of talk about clips, I also do want to ladder back to a question in the chat from Aubrey as well. She's asking about how important is it to kind of have that nice studio background if you're doing video, and is it worth it? I'd love to get your take on that, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the budget, you have the space to actually make a nice studio, there is the sense of legitimacy and authority when it's a professional video and audio look, and it doesn't have to break the bank. You can get, really good priced equipment, and even your phone can look great with proper lighting as your camera. But I would not let that stop you from starting today, because you see a lot of creators and even brands that it might have like that low quality look, but sometimes that actually performs well on TikTok and Instagram Reels because it feels more real life. And so I would say, even if you're starting with zero equipment, just turn on the camera, because that is still going to be more valuable than trying to do audio or text only content.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you brought up another point that I also kind of wanted to touch on as well, in the sense of like, if you are going to repurpose your content, and to your point earlier, you could absolutely repurpose the same content across channels, but it is worth thinking about how you can then customize that content for that channel, right? Like what you post on TikTok is going to look different, than what you post on LinkedIn. And mind you, now that's not the most groundbreaking thing to say, but it is funny how sometimes we forget it once we're in the post-production process. But, if it's something a little bit more lo-fi that you can leverage on TikTok, then I think that's kind of a good way to go. And I guess on that note, I know we've touched on it a little bit, but do you have any other recommendations or strategies when you're looking to cut up long form content versus short form content as far as look, feel, style?
For the short form content, that first second is really important. And
100%.
so I would not, just take a 30 or 60-second clip. Even if that clip is good, if it takes 5 to 10 seconds to get to the good part, it's actually too long for short form content. So what I tell people is, find that clip that's great from your content. Find the exact moment, whether it's someone laughing, someone reacting to something really inspirational. Put that second or two at the beginning of the clip. cut to the rest of it, which will also include the clip you just used for the intro, because you really need to focus on the hook on that short form content. You really need to focus on the hook on the long form as well, and we can get into that. But for short form stuff, that first second, 2 seconds is really valuable.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel I'm bad about that too. If you're online, if I'm not interested in the first couple of seconds,
For sure.
if I think you got to think about how you consume content, and if if you're go outside of your brand and your identity, right? If I didn't work for X company, would I care about this? Would the first 2 seconds grab me? And if not, I think it's worth looking a little bit deeper into the episode for what else you can find.
And one other quick tip on that, think about the audience who has no idea of your brand, never seen you as a creator. The question in their mind every time they scroll to a new video is, should I watch this? Should I spend the time watching the rest of this video? And that's the question you need to answer right up front. Is it valuable enough for them to stay tuned? And you can see it, just if you scroll reels on TikTok, you'll see like, oh, this person's storytelling capability or whatever they said at the beginning makes me want to keep watching. And that's how you have to think, even as a brand. What is it in those first few seconds that will answer the question, should I keep watching? And if it's yes, then go with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, awesome. So many good things to get excited about. Within that, now that I guess we kind of have a little bit of the what, want to talk maybe a little bit about the why, some of the goals that, you can kind of go after. So I guess, what do you think kind of brands should be, starting to look for, or I guess, how should they be starting with long form or short form video, as far as like laddering back to some of their goals? What are the first steps that they can take into this world? And I guess what benefits should they be seeking?
Yeah, I would think about what format can you sustain long term. You might want to start, you make a couple episodes, but it's just don't have the facility to keep it going. I would really consider, can we have one person dedicated to being a host? And if so, should it have just a co-host and a host, two people dedicated to every episode? And that's going to be the format. And we're going to run at least 10 episodes. And I would encourage brands and companies out there, try to aim for at least 10 episodes. Most podcasts don't make it to 10. So if you can get to 10, you're already in like top percentage of podcasts out there. And if you don't want to do a guest co-host, then think, all right, we're going to do a host and an interview guest. It's going to be a different guest every time. That could be someone within the company, leadership, the CEO of the company, others in that niche, and then line up those guests for those 10 episodes and then start from there. Because consistency is so key in all of these platforms. For podcasts, for YouTube, for Instagram and TikTok, it's consistency. So figure out your format, aim for those 10 episodes, and always be thinking about what value is this going to provide. If it feels like just a sales pitch for an entire podcast episode, that's not going to resonate with people. But if you're sharing valuable information, I always break it down into three things. If you're going to educate, if you're going to entertain, or if you're going to inspire, and ideally maybe two out of those three. So if your podcast can educate people, great. Aim for that. Teach them as much as you can in that podcast in the time you have. If you're going to inspire people with stories that are just moving or inspirational customer success type things, great. Inspire them. If you're going to entertain, maybe you have someone funny on your staff. I think of Duolingo and the kind of social media they post, then entertain. And any of those three or a combination is a great place to start.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is really important to think about what your marketing goals are and then where video fits in. And I also think on this for me is audience is big too. And I also think that's where I guess there's some lovely nuance when it comes to video, right? If one of your goals is you're connecting with CEOs or one of the podcasts I work on is IT leaders or people in that, maybe a full video episode doesn't fit quite perfectly because these are really busy people and they're listening in their podcast, in the car on the way to work. But they're also actively on LinkedIn. So maybe it's you capture the video of that episode and then that's where you populate the video. And to your point, I really want to hammer home the consistency piece. We talk about it a lot. And even if you have an audio podcast, but you're going to take the baby steps and start integrating video clips, even the consistency of posting those video clips across LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're posting is super important. That just builds back to an earlier point, just so much audience trust when they know and they can expect. And we see that all the time, right? If sometimes production gets crazy and posting gets shifted, there is an impact as far as, getting traction when you first launch that. I want want to shift a little bit. So taking a look at the broader marketing strategy or your broader marketing goal, what are some ways that brands can integrate video kind of across channels and across their strategies? Where can video podcasting pop up?
Again, I tell people to be everywhere. Great places like newsletters. A lot of times companies will have an email list that they share things. Share the podcast there. Create an engaging thumbnail. And we might not be able to talk about packaging a lot in this webinar, but packaging is huge. Making a compelling thumbnail and title. Put that in your newsletter. Put that somewhere on your homepage. Embed the latest episode of the podcast. And if you land a big guest or if the CEO is interviewed, share that out, both on social media and LinkedIn, but in whatever avenues you have. And that's another strategy, is try to land those big guests, not only leaderships in your own company, but if you can find others that are just tangentially related to your niche or to your industry, that can be a way to, kind of share audience. And the audience of that big guest can hopefully find your show and vice versa. So be everywhere. But in newsletter, we actually started doing a thing where we automated the show notes for our podcast via RSS through a service where it will email everyone on our email list the show notes every week. And so, if your show notes are valuable, like you're providing links, you're sharing resources in those show notes, people will want to sign up because they can get it just in their inbox. A lot of times people are listening or watching podcasts where they can't click or write something down. So we say, hey, if you want the show notes every week, sign up for our email list. We'll send it to you after every episode. Now you're building an email list and you get to share those show notes, share that value with a link to that episode. And just those kinds of creative ways you can get in front of more people, providing value, but also building that trust.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a great way to kind of repurpose some of that content. And I mean, we talk about it. You can do it with audio, but if it's newsletters, blogs, integrate it, get it in there, get it set up. And another one that we found interesting is, say you have a social clip that does really well. You post it on YouTube Shorts, it takes some traction. Maybe consider sending that over to your paid digital team. If they're running a series of paid advertisements and there's something that jives well that people really liked, that maybe ladders back to the brand, but to your point, still kind of has that innate value or engagement. It might be worth to play around there, A/B test it a little bit, see what sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. And eventually, when you start building that trust and that relationship with your audience, there can be calls to action. I don't want to discourage to say never, to promote your own product or your own service, but you just have to remember it's kind of like a 5-to-1, or even changing that ratio of providing 5 really pieces of valuable content that people get value just inherently in what you've created. And then that one time where you're like, if you loved this, you should check out X, Y, or Z and our product or our service.
Yeah, I love that you brought it up, because that goes right into another thing I wanted to ask you about. I think for, at least on our side, right, whenever you're dealing with brands, you don't want to come across as too salesy. It's kind of the kiss of death, and consumers are smart. They know when they're being sold to. I think we all do. So when it comes to video, how can you avoid making your video feel a little commercially or over too salesy an approach?
Don't start with ROI, which is tough. A lot of times when there's a new initiative in the company, the immediate question is, what is the ROI? And initially, to be honest, you're not going to be able to measure it right away. You can't measure affinity for a brand or trust in customers who are not paying customers yet, your audience members. So try not to focus on ROI first. But when you do have that, when you're developing that value, then start measuring it. You can tell people to click, do promos or other kinds of things in those clips, in those reels and TikToks and things like that. But again, look at brands who I think are doing it really well. And also, just on a side note, it's funny to see how many brands are engaging on other creators' content on things like Instagram and TikTok. Like I see Microsoft, I'll see Google, I see all these big brands commenting on other videos that are going viral. And that's just another way for people to start developing an affinity for your brand. And the psychology is, this brand is not just out here to get us to buy something. They're actually in this with us. There's that feeling of a little bit of camaraderie almost. And so think about how you can also not only make your own content, make it valuable for your audience, but also start engaging with these platforms and creators on those platforms at large.
No, I think that's such a great and funny comment to call out. I was on social media the other day and I see like Microsoft and Wendy's are commenting on another podcast. It's like, what are you guys doing here? But then then I remember that they were there, and you kind of laugh about it later. So I think it's definitely something to consider. Well, awesome. I guess with all this kind of said, I mean, I would be excited to get started. So I think we want to talk a little bit to the pieces around how. So for yourself, what gears or tools would you recommend for a team wanting to start out with video? And I guess maybe, obviously budgets are always in flux, but a small, medium, large approach, I guess if you got it, I'd love to know.
Yeah, and so first of all, start with your phone. I tell people they invest in webcams, they look for these, mirrorless quality webcams. I've tested a bunch of them on the Riverside channel, and honestly, your iPhone and even modern Android phones, they look so good. They actually perform way better than most webcams, especially in lower light performance. So use your phone. If you have an iPhone and a Mac, you can use a feature called continuity camera and just you connect your phone wirelessly as a webcam, works seamlessly. That's great. So you can use the phone in your pocket. When you're ready to upgrade, you can look at mirrorless cameras like from Sony and Canon in about the $1,000 to $2,000 range. And many of them can be used in webcam mode, where you just connect one USB cable from your camera to your computer, select it in Riverside, and that's your camera. So I would literally do mobile phone until you're ready to go to mirrorless and then upgrade there.
Yeah.
For lighting, you can get LED lights anywhere from $20 to several hundred. There's great options. I would just recommend against ring lights. A lot of people aim towards ring lights. You see a lot of like TikTok creators doing it. It's fine, but it's a little harsh. And especially if you wear glasses like I do, you're asking for it because you can see the reflections.
Yeah, the circles on your eyes for sure.
Exactly. So, invest in some nice LED lights when you can. That can just be a couple $100. I think one of the biggest things is we're talking about video a lot, but audio is still important. You got to sound good. A lot of times people will forgive poor quality video before they forgive poor quality audio. And so if you're going to invest in anything, this is one of my favorite USB mics. It's $70. It's the Samson Q2U. It's the USB mic I recommend to pretty much everybody. This sounds great. You can get a little desktop stand for it. And this could take you a long way. Just $70 into a USB mic. And you're going to have a much more professional sound than using things like built-in mics. And then when you're ready to upgrade, one of my favorite mics, I take it with me when I travel, the Shure MV7 Plus. It's another USB mic, one cable to your computer. And you see even professional podcasters using this microphone. I think it's $300. And so $70 gets you started, can take you a long way. The MV7 when you're ready to upgrade. And listen, even if you're, want to interview your CEO or leadership in your company and they're traveling, they don't have any gear, record with their phone, totally fine. The Riverside app on your phone is great. And you can use lots of AI tools to enhance that audio before you publish it, removing background noise, making built-in mic sound, studio quality. So at least do all of that, even if you have zero gear, and it'll take you a long way.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful pieces of advice there. And I also especially like your point of, as much as we're talking about video and we're really excited about it, audio is still so critical. It's important, yes, to have it, look good, but, make sure that audio quality is strong. Make sure, the content that you're verbally chatting about is really worth to grab people's attention, because it doesn't matter if you ladder back to video if the conversation itself maybe isn't where you want it to be. So I think that's important. And I guess within that, I guess maybe more of a hot take question, but what are some of the biggest mistakes you might see brands make with video?
We're understanding the importance of packaging. And so I'm glad it came back up, because you can have a great interview, really valuable content. People should, they'll get so much out of it. But if you don't package it well, and this is really the key for video, because we're talking about YouTube and we're talking about Spotify. And what I'm about to say applies to both. But that thumbnail and that title is so big. If you title your podcast episode 001 on your YouTube channel, it's not going to perform well. It's just not.
Yeah.
So take some time. There's lots of great tools for this. Riverside has some AI tools that will suggest titles based on your content, but make a title that generates curiosity or makes someone wants to click on it, like 10 ways to invest in 2026, or 5 things to avoid in this. Title it well. And for your thumbnail, take some screen grabs of the people when they're smiling so it looks nice. Put them on a gradient background or something appealing. Even that is going to go a long way. And you can use that same thumbnail on YouTube when you upload there. And Spotify also lets you upload thumbnails in creators.spotify.com. So you can use it in both places. Plus, use that image in your email newsletter, on your website, on social media, wherever you're going to promote the podcast. So don't forego packaging, because you can make the best content, but people have to click it first before they hear a word. So package it well with thumbnail, title, and also even in your long form video, focus on that first 30 seconds and think of it as a trailer for the episode. So like we said with the short form, that first second is important. For long form, I would say the first 30 seconds. Share some inspirational clips, some funny moments, reactions in that first 30 seconds, and then put the whole hour-long podcast after that. And that's how you hook someone to actually watching your content.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I love that you laddered back to the point on packaging, because I wanted to do that as well. In a sense, you're so right with the thumbnails. And I think I see it more frequently than I'd like, where I know it's great content. And then I look and, it could just maybe be a stock image of something. It's like, you got a great guest or you got a great title, get it in there. Because like you said, I'm not going to watch a video if I don't click it in the first place. So I think that's super important. And yes, to the episode number and the title, maybe not as necessary. Let's just go with the title. Give me the hitter, give me the content. That's what I'm shooting for.
Right, exactly.
Amazing. Well, I mean, this has been so great. And I guess before we kind of jump into Q&A, if you had to give me like one hammer home video podcasting takeaway that you think is worth sinking your teeth into, what would that be?
Just turn on your camera. Just turn on your camera and start doing it. Do it consistently. Don't let quality, don't let your set stop you. None of that, none of the gear issues. Just if you have a valuable product or service that you truly believe in, that means you should be able to provide value in your niche about any of that. So share your knowledge, share your experience, and just start sharing it. Whatever the quality is at first, it's going to be good enough. Like, it's okay, but just start, be consistent, and you're going to see a return on that over time. It's going to be valuable, especially as we head into 2026. Video's huge. The YouTube, Spotify, everyone's pushing on it. So now's really the time.
Yeah, awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself, Steven. Perfect. Well, I think that wraps up our main discussion, and we will jump into the question and answer period. So if you have any questions for Steven, our absolute pro here, please toss them in the chat. Love to answer anything that still might be mulling about in some brains when it comes to video podcasting.
Super fun. And I'll just say, it's not too late either. A lot of people and brands feel like, oh, is it too late to start? Podcasting's death has been greatly exaggerated for years. You hear about that every few years. But honestly, more people listen to podcasts and watch podcasts now than ever before. It's over 51% of Americans regularly consume podcasts. That's the highest ever. And so now is really the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. Awesome. Question in the chat. Is there ever a time when video might not be relevant to a podcast, or should all brands and creators be using video? What are your thoughts?
I don't think there's a time where it's not relevant, because even if it's just faces on the video talking to each other, you're going to be able to be on YouTube and Spotify as a video, and it's going to immediately be more engaging and more eye-catching than the audio only. So I don't know if it's ever irrelevant. If you have a super valuable conversation and you're sharing incredible information, then yeah, you could be able to grow. One funny example, the Smartless podcast, which is with Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and Sean Hayes. They interview celebrities. They're the top podcast. They're audio only. But think about they already have an audience. And so their podcast audience is their movie and TV show audience. But there's an episode where they interviewed Ted Danson. And if you listen back, and he has a podcast as well, and he called them, I won't say the word, but very silly for not having video. He was like, you got to do video. So even those celebrities who have huge audiences and a successful podcast, even they feel like they should be doing video. And so I don't know if it's ever totally irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you on that. And I think maybe what I'll say to it, right, is among all of it, Stephen, to Stephen's point as well, think about where your audience is. So I think relevance also, it always ladders back to who's listening and, who's tuning in. So I think where video is relevant is where your audience is relevant. Like we said, if, you're skewing on a younger demographic, then yeah, maybe it is time to explore a full video podcast. We know they're watching them more frequently. But if your demographic skews older, okay, maybe we won't invest just yet into a full video podcast, but I'm grabbing clips and I'm putting them on LinkedIn because that's where my audience of, thought leaders in healthcare is, right? Or wherever it may be.
And I would not underestimate even, older generations watching on YouTube. They might not
Mhm.
be at Spotify or on TikTok, although I think some are. They're still watching on YouTube, and you'll see there are creators on YouTube and audience members of all ages. And so I would not discount it just because of your demographic or your target audience. I think that's a place to reach anyone, and even publish the video on Facebook. If
Yeah.
that's where a majority of your audience or customers might lie, you could share the full episode there, or just share the clips on your Facebook page, and I think that'll perform well. Facebook wants people on their platform as long as possible, and if you're sharing long form videos that people watch, that could be successful too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're definitely seeing, I guess, more of a breadth as far as demographic on platform. I mean, on a personal anecdote, my dad has loved to send me a couple, YouTube shorts here and there. So I
There
think
you go.
we're definitely seeing it. I know, at least from my personal experience, he's found some good stuff to send me. So
That's right. That's it.
awesome. Well, thank you for answering the question there about the mics as well. I think it's
Yeah,
good to get your tech stack set up and ready to support.
for sure.
Um, A question here. How much does the set or background matter in video podcasting? I know we chatted about this a little bit earlier, but is there any other thoughts you would kind of have on the background? I know we're talking about just starting and getting going, but if someone was maybe going to invest a little bit in a set, what might be good to have in the background going on?
Again, it can be simple. You don't have to have, fancy background or different color lighting, things like that. A bookcase, a bookshelf in the background can go a long way. Anything that adds a little visual interest or just anything but than a plain solid color can go a long way. Do
Mhm.
you need that? No. If you have a solid color wall and that's all you can record on, go for it. Me and my co-host recently recorded an episode in a hotel. The background is very plain. That episode did just fine compared to our other ones.
Yeah.
So don't feel like it's critical, but anything you can put in. And honestly, this is a little, kind of trick of the trade. But when it comes to YouTube and visual things like that, if you can put something conversation starting in the background that people might comment, ask what it is, or just call it out, that's a way to drive engagement and give something people to talk about in the comments on YouTube and even Spotify. So you can use things in your background to your advantage like that. I think of the Good Hang podcast with Amy Poehler, and
Mhm.
she just had a recent episode where they talked about the objects on her bookshelf for like 10 minutes. And so you don't need it, but you can use it to your advantage, even if it's simple stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a creator that I like. They do more long form content, and they have a bust of Julius Caesar in the back of his videos that has now like become a character in the content. So he'll ladder back to Julius at some point. So I think
Exactly.
there's some fun to be had there.
That's good.
Another question. So for nonprofits focusing on building access to community care in Toronto, or I guess wherever, they may be trying to find an audience or a format to engage with. Is video podcasting or blogs the way to go? So I guess what are your thoughts there for those in the nonprofit space, perhaps?
Again, the word podcast and what a podcast is, I think it's much more flexible today than it has been. And so I know you're saying, is it the right format for what you're trying to do? And I would say make the podcast the format that serves your content or what you're trying
Mhm.
to do. And so if it's interviews about community care, that could be the podcast. And it could be a podcast that's just done on the street.
Mhm.
Again, that USB microphone and a mobile device can be your whole setup, and you record a 5 to 10 minute episode on the go. And every episode might be in a different location. So, don't think of podcasting as two people sitting in a room across a table. It could be any format that works for you. And is it one for that, a nonprofit focusing on building access to community care? I mean, I really don't know of a topic that doesn't fit in the podcast niche. And I say podcast over a blog and something else because you can repurpose that podcast in so many different ways, including a blog. So if you record a 20 or 30-minute podcast episode, again, Rivers has a feature like Co-Creator, you can ask it to make a blog post out of your podcast. And
Mhm.
now you have that content in addition to the podcast, in addition to clips. And so when it comes to just flexibility of content, doing a podcast, that longer form type of video, especially, just gives you everything else on the back end. And it just becomes easier to repurpose it in so many different ways.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can have a great conversation, you can have a great podcast. So if you're doing that with your brand
Exactly.
or elsewhere, I think that's really the crux of it. Um, Yeah, no, and
Awesome.
thank you for that lovely answer in the chat, Stephen. Perfect.
Awesome.
There's any more questions at all lurking around, but as we wait for any final questions to jump, thank you so much, Stephen. I've had so much fun chatting with you today, and I hope that we've created some passion for video, but also some strategy, because it's important to have both those things when you tackle something new.
It's super fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.